Keep your money, sir. Marcus froze. The crisp $50 bill still hung between his fingers, stretched out over the counter like an offering nobody had asked him to make. The little girl did not blink. She did not step back. She just stood there, both small hands wrapped around a brown paper bag, holding it against her chest like it was the last thing in the world that belonged to her. She was maybe 11, 12 at the most. Thin at the shoulders, dark braids pulled back so tight they shone under the flickering fluorescent light above the register. Her eyes were steady, unblinking, not angry, not scared, just certain. Certain in a way no child that age should ever have to be. The cashier looked between them. An old man behind Marcus in line cleared his throat and pretended to read a magazine. Somewhere in the back of the store, a freezer hummed. The fluorescent light above the counter flickered once, twice, and steadied. Marcus lowered his hands slowly, but she had already turned away. She counted her coins onto the counter one at a time. A quarter, 2 dimes, 3 nickels. A small pile of pennies she pushed forward with the tip of her finger. Every coin made a tiny sound against the wood, and every sound seemed louder than it should have been. Marcus Whitaker had signed checks for hospitals. He had donated wings to universities. He had built a company worth $800 million from the back of a used Toyota Corolla. And in that moment, standing in a corner store on the wrong side of town, holding out $50 to a child who had refused it, he understood absolutely nothing about what was happening in front of him. He did not know it yet, but the next 3 weeks of his life were going to break every idea he had ever held about what it meant to help someone. And the little girl with the brown paper bag, the one whose name he did not yet know, was going to be the person who broke them. This is her story, and this is how a billionaire finally learned the one lesson his money had never taught him. 7 minutes earlier, Marcus Whitaker had been sitting in the back of a black Mercedes with tinted windows, tapping a message into his phone that he would never finish sending. The driver, a man named Henry who had worked for him for 9 years, had made a wrong turn off the main avenue because a delivery truck had jackknifed across 2 lanes and traffic was backed up for half a mile. "Sir," Henry had said, glancing in the rearview mirror, "I'll cut through Elm and pick up the interstate on the other side. 10 minutes, maybe 12. Marcus had not looked up from his phone. "Fine." The Mercedes turned. The neighborhoods changed. The buildings got shorter. The trees got thinner. The billboards changed from luxury watches to bail bonds. Marcus, still looking at his phone, did not notice any of it. Then, the car stalled. It made a small, unhappy sound, a cough, a shudder, and rolled to a stop against the curb. Henry frowned, tried the ignition. Nothing. Tried again. Nothing. That's not possible," Henry said. "I had it serviced Tuesday." Marcus finally looked up. Outside the tinted glass, he saw a row of small brick storefronts, a barber shop with a hand-painted sign, a laundromat, a liquor store with bars on the windows. On the corner, a tiny grocery store with a faded green awning that read simply, "Edna's." Henry was already on the phone with roadside assistance. 45 minutes, he said apologetically, hand over the receiver. "They're backed up." Marcus checked the time. He had a meeting in the city at 4. It was 1:15. He sighed, undid his seatbelt. "I'll get some water," he said. "Call me when they get here." Henry looked uncomfortable. "Sir, I don't know if—" "It's a grocery store, Henry. I think I'll survive." Marcus stepped out of the Mercedes. The afternoon air hit him, warm, smelling of asphalt and fried food from somewhere down the block. A woman pushing a stroller looked at his suit, at his shoes, at the black car behind him, and kept walking without a word. Two teenage boys on a stoop across the street watched him without expression. He walked into Edna's. A bell above the door jingled. The air inside was cooler, thick with the smell of cardboard and old wood and something faintly sweet, maybe overripe bananas from the small produce bin near the door. The store was narrow, 3 short aisles deep, shelves stacked from floor to ceiling with dented cans, cereal boxes, chip bags. Behind the counter stood a black woman in her 60s, silver hair pulled back in a bun, reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck. She looked up when the bell rang, took one look at Marcus's suit, and her expression did not change at all. As if she had seen everything already and none of it surprised her. "Afternoon," she said, in a voice that was neither warm nor cold. "Afternoon," Marcus said. He walked toward the small cooler at the back for a bottle of water, and that was when he saw her. She was standing at the end of the second aisle, holding a small red plastic basket. She could not have been more than 11 years old. 2 tight braids, a denim jacket that had been washed so many times the blue had gone soft. In the basket, a loaf of white bread, a jar of peanut butter, a small carton of eggs, a box of powdered milk, and 2 cans of what looked like chicken noodle soup. She was counting on her fingers. Her lips moved silently. Her brow was furrowed in concentration. She looked at the peanut butter, then at her fingers, then set the peanut butter back on the shelf. She looked at her fingers again. She put the peanut butter back in the basket. She took out one of the cans of soup and set it back on the shelf. Then she nodded once to herself and walked to the counter. Marcus watched all of this from behind a display of paper towels. He didn't know why he was watching. He just was. She set the basket on the counter. The woman behind the register, Edna, he guessed, did not smile. But her whole face softened in a way it had not for him. "Afternoon, baby." "Afternoon, Mrs. Edna. How's Nana today?" The little girl hesitated. She had a hard morning, but she ate the oatmeal. That's good. That's good." Edna began ringing up the items, one at a time, punching the buttons on an ancient cash register that clanked with every keystroke. "8.52, baby." The girl reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small, folded envelope. She opened it carefully, as if what was inside might blow away, and began counting bills onto the counter. 2 crumpled ones, then coins. She counted the coins twice. "I'm short," she said quietly. "I'm short 43 cents. Edna's face did not change. "Put the soup back, baby. It'll keep till Friday." The girl nodded. She started to reach for the can. And that was when Marcus stepped forward. He didn't think about it. He just did it. He pulled out his wallet, the soft black leather one, hand-stitched, that had cost him more than the entire contents of this store, and he took out a $50 bill. "Please," he said, "let me, and add whatever else she wants." The girl looked up at him. And that was when she said it. "Keep your money, sir." For a long moment, nobody spoke. Marcus stood there with the 50 still in his hand. The girl stood there with the can of soup in hers. Edna stood behind the register with her arms folded across her chest. And if Marcus had been paying attention, he would have seen the smallest flicker of something like approval cross her face. But Marcus wasn't paying attention. He was confused. I'm sorry. I didn't mean." He tried to smile. It came out crooked. "I only wanted to help." "I know," the girl said. Her voice was small but not shy. "But I don't need your help. Thank you." She turned back to Edna and pushed the can of soup gently across the counter. "I'll come back Friday for it, Mrs. Edna." "I know you will, baby." The girl picked up her paper bag, tucked it against her chest, and walked past Marcus without looking at him. The bell above the door jingled again. She was gone. Marcus stood there holding a $50 bill in a store where he had never been, in a neighborhood he could not have found on a map, and he felt, for the first time in a very long time, completely, entirely stupid. He turned to Edna. "I didn't mean to offend her. I could see she was short. I have money. I can help. Why wouldn't she let me help?" Edna finally looked at him, really looked at him. Her eyes were dark brown and lined at the corners, and there was nothing unkind in them, but there was also nothing that was going to make this easy for him. "Mister," she said, "you walked in here 5 minutes ago. You don't know that child's name. You don't know where she lives. You don't know what she's carrying. And you thought $50 was going to fix whatever it is you thought you saw." "I didn't think it would fix." "Yes, you did." She said it without heat, just as a fact. "That's exactly what you thought. And that's why she said no." Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I don't understand." "I know you don't," Edna said. "That's why she said no." She turned and began restocking a rack of chewing gum, her back to him now. Marcus stood in the middle of the store for another long moment, the $50 bill limp in his hand, and then he slowly put it back in his wallet. He bought a bottle of water. He paid with a 20. Edna gave him his change in coins and small bills, counting each one out carefully, and she did not smile. He walked out to the Mercedes. Henry was still on the phone. The tow truck was still 40 minutes away. Marcus stood on the sidewalk in his $6,000 suit and watched the little girl walk down the block, the brown paper bag pressed against her chest, her two tight braids swinging slightly with each step. She turned a corner. She was gone. He should have gotten back in the car. He should have made his 4 o'clock. He should have forgotten the whole thing by the time he got home to his wife. He didn't. He walked back into Edna's. Edna looked up from the gum rack. She did not seem surprised. "Ma'am," Marcus said, "my name is Marcus Whitaker. I own a company called Whitaker Holdings. I have resources. I saw a child who couldn't afford 43 cents worth of soup. I don't want to embarrass her. I don't want to hurt her. I just want to understand what I did wrong." Edna studied him for a very long time. Then she said, "Sit down, Mr. Whitaker." She gestured to a small folding chair beside the door, the kind old men sit on to play checkers. Marcus sat. His knees were nearly at his chest. Edna pulled up a stool. "That child's name," she said, "is Kalia." "Kalia Bennett," Edna said. "She's 11 years old. She lives 3 blocks from here in a little apartment above the laundromat, with her grandmother, Ruth. Everybody calls her Nana Ruth. And her little cousin, Jalen. Jalen is 6. Ruth is 68. Ruth has diabetes and a bad hip and glaucoma in her left eye, and she can't stand for more than about 10 minutes at a time without something to lean on." Marcus was listening. "Kalia's mama passed when she was 7. Overdose. Not gonna sugarcoat it for you, mister. This neighborhood buries young mamas the way rich neighborhoods bury old dogs. It happens. Jalen's mama, that's Kalia's aunt, she's in prison. 2 more years if she keeps her nose clean, which she won't. Kalia's daddy nobody's seen since she was in diapers. Jalen's daddy, same story." She paused, adjusted her reading glasses. "So it's Ruth and Kalia and Jalen, in a 2-bedroom apartment above the laundromat. Ruth gets her Social Security. $382 a month goes to rent. Utilities take another $80. Ruth's insulin isn't covered right by the pharmacy card, so that's another $60. You do the math." Marcus was doing the math. "That leaves them a little over $200 a month," Edna said, "to feed 3 human beings, keep clothes on their backs, keep the bus fare covered when Ruth's got to go to the clinic, and put a birthday cake on the table twice a year. And that's if nothing breaks. That's if nobody gets sick. That's if the landlord doesn't raise rent, which he did last April. She looked at him. So Kalia does the shopping. Kalia does the cooking. Kalia gets Jalen to school, comes home, does her own homework, helps Nana Ruth to the bathroom, cooks supper, washes the dishes, and puts Jalen to bed. She is 11 years old and she runs a household. Marcus swallowed. Then let me help her, he said. I can pay their rent. I can pay for the grandmother's medicine. I can… Stop. Edna held up one hand. Her voice was very calm. Stop, Mr. Whitaker, because that right there, that is exactly what she was afraid you were going to say. He blinked. Afraid? Edna set down her reading glasses on the counter. Mister, she said, let me ask you a question. If a stranger, a rich white stranger in a suit, walked up to that child on the street tomorrow and handed her $1,000 in cash, what do you think happens to her? Marcus thought about it. She buys groceries? No. Edna shook her head slowly. No, sir. What happens is this. Somebody sees. Maybe a neighbor, maybe a teacher, maybe just a nosy busybody who don't like the look of it. And somebody makes a phone call. And 2 weeks later, a lady from Child Protective Services knocks on that apartment door with a clipboard. And she asks Nana Ruth some questions, and she looks around that little apartment, and she opens the refrigerator, and she counts the cans in the cabinet. And she asks Kalia where her mama is. Edna's eyes were steady. And that lady writes in her little report that Ruth is 68 years old, half blind, can't stand for 10 minutes at a stretch, and is raising 2 children on $300 a month. And that lady's supervisor reads that report. And that supervisor circles the word unfit. And 2 weeks after that, they come and they take Jalen, because he's 6 and he's easier to place. And then they come back 3 weeks later and they take Kalia, and they put her in a group home in Baytown where she doesn't know a soul. And she never sees her grandmother again. Marcus felt cold. That can't be. That's exactly what happens, mister. I've seen it 3 times on this block alone in the last 8 years. Poverty is against the law in this country. Nobody says it out loud, but it is. And that child knows it. She has known it since she was 7 years old, standing in a courtroom listening to a judge decide whether her grandmother was allowed to keep her. He sat back in the folding chair. His mouth was dry. So when a stranger offers her $50, Edna said, what she hears is not a kindness. What she hears is, this man just made me visible. And visible, in a place like this, is dangerous. For a long time, Marcus did not speak. Finally, he said, so there's nothing I can do. Edna almost smiled. I didn't say that. I said what you tried to do was wrong. The tow truck came. Henry drove Marcus home. Marcus did not send a single message. He did not look at his phone. He watched the neighborhoods change back. The trees got thicker, the buildings got taller, the billboards changed back to watches, and he thought about a little girl with 2 tight braids counting coins onto a wooden counter. His wife's name was Diane. She was 52, silver blonde, and she had loved him for 29 years. When he came in through the back door of the house, a house with 7 bedrooms, most of them empty, she took one look at his face and set down her wine glass. What happened? He told her. All of it. The stalled car, the store, the girl, Edna, the 43 cents, the soup she had put back. The way she had said, keep your money, sir. Not with anger, but with a kind of quiet finality that made him feel, for the first time in his adult life, like his money was small. Diane listened. She did not interrupt. When he was done, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, so what are you going to do? I don't know. Yes, you do. He looked at her. Marcus, she said gently, you don't get to have this feeling and then not do anything about it. That's not the man I married. But, and here she reached across the table and took his hand, you also don't get to fix this the way you fix everything else. Because this isn't broken the way you think it is. This is not a problem you can write a check for. Do you understand me? He nodded slowly. That woman at the store, Diane said, Edna, go back and see her. Not tomorrow, not with a plan. Just go back and listen. Diane, I have 3 board meetings cancel them. He looked at her. She looked back at him. 29 years of marriage in that one look. He canceled the board meetings. He went back to Edna's the next morning at 9. He was not wearing a suit. He had thought about that all night. Diane had laid out a pair of jeans and a plain gray sweater, clothes he had not worn in a decade, clothes he had forgotten he owned. He drove himself. He parked the Mercedes 2 blocks away and walked. The bell above Edna's door jingled. Edna looked up. She looked at his sweater. She looked at his jeans. Her mouth twitched, and for 1 second, Marcus was certain she was about to laugh at him. She didn't. She just said, "Coffee's on the burner. Cup's over there." He poured himself a cup. It was thin and burnt and cost 50 cents. He sat down on the folding chair. He came back the next day, and the next. He didn't say much. He listened. He learned that the flickering fluorescent light above the register had been flickering for 2 years because the fixture needed replacing and the landlord wouldn't do it. He learned that on Tuesday afternoons, 6 or 7 kids from the block came into the store after school because it was warm, and Edna let them stay as long as they didn't shoplift. He learned that a woman named Miss Lorraine ran a small community center, the Hopewell Center, 3 blocks over, in the basement of a Baptist church. He learned that Miss Lorraine served free meals on Saturdays, ran a homework club on weekdays, and had been trying for 6 years to raise enough money to keep the lights on and hire 1 part-time nurse to see kids and old folks who couldn't afford the clinic. He learned that Kalia came to the Hopewell Center almost every afternoon. Not for the free food. She was too proud to eat it in front of anybody. She came to volunteer. She read to the younger kids. She walked Miss Lorraine's paperwork to the copy shop. She swept the basement floor. 11 years old. Sweeping a basement floor. On the 4th day, Kalia came into Edna's store. She stopped when she saw Marcus sitting on the folding chair by the door. Her eyes narrowed. "Afternoon," Marcus said carefully. "Afternoon," she said. She did not smile. She walked past him to the shelves. She picked out a small bag of rice, a can of beans, and, after standing in front of the shelf for a full minute, a single apple. She brought them to the counter. Edna rang her up. Kalia paid in coins. Edna gave her a receipt. Kalia walked to the door. She stopped. She looked back at Marcus. "You still here?" she said. "I'm still here." "Why?" He thought about it. He wanted very badly to say the right thing. He said the true thing instead. "Because I don't know how to help, and I'm trying to learn." Kalia looked at him for a very long time. It was the same look she had given him at the counter. Steady, unblinking, not angry, not scared, just measuring him. Then she nodded once, very slightly, and walked out. When she was gone, Edna said quietly, That was more than she's ever given anybody in this store the first week. On the 7th day, Edna said, "Come with me." She locked the store. She turned the little cardboard sign to "Closed." She walked Marcus 3 blocks over, past the laundromat above which Kalia lived, past a boarded-up video store, past a barber shop where 3 men sat on the stoop and nodded at Edna as she passed. She stopped in front of a small Baptist church with a hand-painted sign in the front yard, "Hopewell." The basement smelled like cabbage and old carpet and floor wax. A dozen kids sat at folding tables doing homework under buzzing lights. In the corner, a woman with a gray afro and glasses on a chain was arguing quietly with a plumber about a leaky pipe. That was Miss Lorraine. Edna introduced them. Miss Lorraine looked Marcus up and down. The jeans, the sweater, the softness around his eyes from 4 nights of not sleeping. "You're the man from the store." "I am." "Edna says you're serious." Marcus glanced at Edna. Edna's face was unreadable. "I'm trying to be," he said. Miss Lorraine sighed. She sat down at a folding table. She waved Marcus into the chair across from her. "Mister," she said, "I got 41 kids who come through here every week. I got a food pantry that runs out by Wednesday every Wednesday. I got a heating bill I can't pay. I got a nurse I can't hire. I got a building that needs a new furnace, a new roof, and rewiring the city inspector's been threatening me about for 2 years. If I had $200,000 right now, I could keep the doors open for another 10 years. If I had $500,000, I could hire the nurse and start a real after-school program with 2 more full-time staff. And if I had $1 million," she almost smiled, "well, then I could stop having this conversation with people like you." Marcus was quiet. "Now," Miss Lorraine said, "before you get excited and pull out that checkbook, let me tell you something. Don't try to save her. Kalia, don't try. She doesn't need saving. She needs somebody who stays. You understand the difference?" He did not entirely, but he nodded. "Money," Miss Lorraine said, "money is easy. Any fool with a bank account can write a check. What Kalia needs, what this whole block needs, is a building she can walk into where she is not the exception, where she is not the special case, where she is not the poor girl the rich man decided to rescue. She needs a place where she is one of 40 kids getting a hot meal on a Tuesday, where nobody looks at her twice, where nobody asks her questions, where her grandmother can walk in and get her blood pressure checked without paperwork, where her little cousin can play with toys that nobody's tracking." She leaned forward. "You want to help her? Don't help her. Help this." She spread her arms to include the basement, the buzzing lights, the arguing plumber, the kids at the tables. You lift the whole boat. You don't hand her a life preserver. Marcus sat with that. Then he said, "Miss Lorraine, may I see the building?" She smiled for the first time. "Son, I thought you'd never ask." The plan took shape slowly over the next 10 days. Marcus did not tell Kalia. He did not tell Edna, not at first. He told Miss Lorraine, and only Miss Lorraine. And he told her the same thing 3 different ways to make sure she believed him. "My name stays off of it," he said. "No plaque, no press release, no ribbon cutting. If anybody asks who is funding this, you tell them an anonymous foundation. If they push, you tell them a private grant. If they push again, you tell them to mind their own business. Do you understand me?" Miss Lorraine understood. He set up a foundation in Diane's maiden name, the Chandler Family Trust. He funded it with $2 million in the first tranche and committed to $500,000 a year for the next 10 years. He hired a lawyer he trusted, an old classmate, a black woman named Yvette, who had spent her career on nonprofit law, and he told her, "Make this bulletproof. Nothing about this comes back to me. Nothing about this puts a spotlight on any child in that building." Yvette drew up the papers. It took 8 days. On the 9th day, Marcus was sitting on the folding chair in Edna's store, drinking a 50-cent cup of thin coffee, when the door burst open. It was Jalen, the 6-year-old, Kalia's little cousin. He was crying so hard he could barely breathe. His shoelaces were untied and his coat was on inside out. "Mrs. Edna, Mrs. Edna, Nana fell down. Kalia said get you. Kalia said." Edna was around the counter in half a second. "Show me, baby." They ran. Marcus ran with them. The apartment above the laundromat was one flight up a narrow staircase that smelled like detergent. The door was open. Kalia was on the floor of the small kitchen, holding her grandmother's head in her lap. Nana Ruth was conscious, but her face was gray, and her breathing was shallow, and there was a small cut above her eyebrow where she had hit the corner of the table on the way down. "Nana, Nana, stay with me, Nana." "I called 911, Kalia said, without looking up. Her voice was completely level. Her hands were completely steady. It was the calmest Marcus had ever heard an 11-year-old speak. "They said 15 minutes. It's been 11. Edna knelt beside her. "Baby, you did right. You did right." Kalia looked up. She saw Marcus in the doorway. And for the first time since he had met her, for the first time in the entire 2.5 weeks, her face broke. Not much, just a little. Just her lower lip for half a second. "Please don't call them," she whispered. Marcus did not know who "them" was at first. "Please, please don't call anybody. Please." If they come and they see, they'll take Jalen. They'll take me. Please, please, mister, I know you're rich, I know you could, but please don't." He understood then. She thought that because he had money, he was going to call someone, a social worker, a case manager, someone with a clipboard. She thought his help was going to be the thing that ended her family. Marcus knelt down on the kitchen floor of the apartment above the laundromat, in his jeans and his gray sweater, and he looked her in the eye. "Kalia," he said, "I am not going to call anybody. I am not going to say anything to anybody. I am here because Jalen ran into Edna's store and I followed you. That is all. Do you hear me?" She was looking at him. "I hear you. You called 911. That was the right thing. When they come, you tell them your grandmother tripped on the kitchen rug. You tell them you were doing your homework at the table. You tell them nothing else. Do you understand?" She nodded. "And when they take her to the hospital," he said, "Mrs. Edna is going to go with her. And I am going to stay here with you and Jalen until she comes back. And nobody is going to write anything on any clipboard about this house. Do you understand me?" Kalia's eyes filled with tears. Not for herself, not for her grandmother. For the sheer relief of being believed. "I understand." The ambulance came. Nana Ruth was stable. A low blood sugar episode, the paramedics said. Nothing critical, but she needed to be checked at the hospital. Edna went with her. Marcus stayed. He sat on the couch with Jalen curled up against his side, watching cartoons on a small television, while Kalia sat at the kitchen table and did her 5th-grade math homework, as if the world had not just tilted. At one point, without looking up from her worksheet, she said quietly, "Thank you, sir." Marcus said, "You're welcome, Kalia." That was the first time she had said his name, his title at least, without anger in it. Nana Ruth came home the next morning. She was fine. Marcus went home too. The papers on the Hopewell Center were signed 3 days later. The community center did not close on Marcus's money the way a museum closes on a donor's money. There was no gala, there was no plaque. Miss Lorraine simply announced one Monday morning that a private family foundation had made a long-term commitment to the center and that starting the following week, they would be expanding. Hot meals 5 days a week instead of 1, a part-time nurse on Tuesdays and Thursdays, a homework tutor every afternoon, a small pharmacy voucher program for seniors in the neighborhood, insulin, blood pressure medicine, glaucoma drops, no questions asked, no paperwork. You just brought your prescription bottle and Miss Lorraine's assistant filled it. A summer camp for the kids, 6 weeks, free. A washer and dryer in the basement for anyone who needed clean clothes for a job interview. A small clothing closet in the church annex run by 3 grandmothers from the neighborhood, stocked with donated coats, shoes, and school uniforms. The neighborhood did not know where the money came from. The neighborhood did not need to know. What the neighborhood knew was that the lights at Hopewell stayed on all winter, and that on Tuesday afternoons the smell of something good, greens and cornbread and baked chicken, began to drift up from the basement of the Little Baptist Church and settle on the whole block. Kalia noticed. Of course she noticed. She was there almost every day. She helped serve. She read to the younger kids. She swept the floor. But now she also ate, sometimes, if it was busy enough that nobody was watching her eat. Now she took home a small bag of leftovers on Fridays because Miss Lorraine handed them out to every volunteer, every single one, and nobody was singled out. Now, once a week, the nurse came to the apartment above the laundromat and checked Nana Ruth's blood sugar. Not as a special favor, as part of the neighborhood senior visit program that the center had just started. There were 9 other seniors on the same route. Nana Ruth was not the special case. Nana Ruth's insulin was suddenly, mysteriously, more affordable. The voucher program covered the difference between her Medicare price and the pharmacy price. Jalen went to the free summer camp. He came home with a sunburn and a certificate for best cannonball in the swimming pool at the Y. And Kalia, once a month, without knowing where it came from, found a small envelope in her locker at school with a $20 bill in it and a typed note that said only, "From a friend of the family." Not enough to raise flags, not enough to trigger anything, just enough to buy a pair of new sneakers when the old ones wore through. Just enough to buy Jalen a birthday cake in April. Just enough to make her, for the first time in her life, a child who could once in a while breathe out. It took her 4 months to figure out. She was 13 when she did, not 11 anymore. A little taller, the braids the same, the eyes the same, still steady, still measuring. But now, sometimes, when Jalen made a joke or Nana Ruth cracked a smile, a little softer. It was a Saturday afternoon at the Hopewell Center. Marcus was there, as he was there most Saturdays now, in his jeans and his gray sweater, wiping down tables after the lunch service. Nobody at Hopewell called him Mr. Whitaker. Nobody at Hopewell knew he was a billionaire. To the kids, he was just Mr. Marcus, the tall, quiet man who was pretty good at long division and even better at Connect 4. Kalia walked over to him with a rag in her hand. "Mr. Marcus?" "Kalia?" "I have a question." "All right." "Why," she said, "does Miss Lorraine's assistant order 2 extra cases of powdered milk every month?" "Because we don't use 2 extra cases. We use half a case. So where do the other 1.5 go?" Marcus paused with the rag in his hand. "That's a good question," he said carefully. "I think," Kalia said, "they go into little bags that Miss Lorraine leaves on people's porches. Old ladies mostly. People who won't come to the center." I think somebody's paying for them. I think somebody's been paying for a lot of things. She looked up at him. And I think it's you. The kitchen was quiet. Someone in the far corner laughed at something on a phone. A pot rattled. Miss Lorraine, standing near the doorway with a clipboard, glanced over, just once, and looked away. Marcus set down the rag. He knelt down so he was at Kalia's eye level. He had learned in the last 4 months that this mattered. That kneeling down to a child was one of the ways you told them you were not going to look down on them. "Kalia," he said, "may I tell you something, and would you keep it between us?" She nodded. "A long time ago," he said, "when I was very young, I was poor too. Not the same way. I had 2 parents and enough to eat. But I remember what it felt like to have a stranger look at me like I was a problem to be solved. I promised myself, when I got older, that I would never do that to another child. And then, 4 months ago, I met you. And I did exactly that. And you told me no. And you were right to tell me no." Kalia was listening. "I couldn't give you money," he said, "not directly. Because I saw, once Mrs. Edna explained it to me, that giving money to you would have made you a target. So I gave money to the room instead. I gave it to the building. I gave it to Miss Lorraine, who knows this neighborhood better than I ever will. And I told her, lift the whole boat. Don't lift one child." He looked at her. "You are not being rescued, Kalia. You are being surrounded. There is a difference. Do you understand?" She did not answer for a long time. Then, slowly, she reached out with the small hand that was not holding the rag, and she placed it, very lightly, on his shoulder. "Thank you," she said. That was all. 3 words. Marcus Whitaker had signed papers worth billions. He had closed deals in Tokyo and London and Sao Paulo. He had shaken hands with senators and ball players and 2 former presidents. He had never, not once in his life, received a thank you that felt heavier than that one. Nana Ruth lived 4 more years. She saw Kalia graduate from 8th grade with honors. She saw Jalen learn to read chapter books out loud at the kitchen table. She saw the neighborhood slowly get a little easier to live in. A little more soup on Tuesdays, a little less fear on Fridays. When she passed, the church was full. Miss Lorraine spoke. Edna spoke. Kalia, 15 years old now, taller than her grandmother had ever been, spoke last. She talked about a woman who had raised 2 children on $380 a month and never once let either of them go to school hungry. She talked about a woman who had taught her that dignity was not something you asked for. It was something you kept, even when everything else was gone. She did not mention Marcus. She did not need to. He was in the 3rd pew, in his jeans and his gray sweater. And when the service was over, she walked past him without stopping, and she brushed her fingers, very lightly, against the back of his hand. That was enough. Kalia went to college. The Chandler Family Trust, quietly, paid for it, through a scholarship fund at the community center that 11 other kids from the neighborhood also received, so that she was, again, never the special case, never the singled-out one. She studied social work. She said in her application essay that she wanted to work with families the system was about to break and to stand between them and the clipboard. She is 24 years old now. She runs the Hopewell Center's Family Services program. Miss Lorraine retired last year and handed her the keys. Jalen is in college, studying to be a nurse. He wants to work in the same clinic that once could not afford to keep its lights on. Marcus is 71. He still comes to the center on Saturdays. He still wipes down tables. He is still pretty good at long division and even better at Connect 4. Nobody there calls him a billionaire. Nobody there calls him a rescuer. They call him Mr. Marcus. And once a year, on the anniversary of the day Kalia said, "Keep your money, sir," in a small grocery store on a corner where his driver had made a wrong turn, Marcus Whitaker walks into Edna's. Edna is 82 now and still behind the counter, and he buys a bottle of water and a small bag of rice and a can of chicken noodle soup, and he pays exactly $8.52 in cash, and he leaves. Because he learned that day the one thing his money had never taught him. Help is not a check. Help is showing up. Help is knowing somebody's name. Help is standing in a kitchen while an ambulance is on the way and promising a scared 11-year-old that no one is going to take her family away from her. And help, real help, is not a thing you give. It is a thing you become. If this story moved you, please leave a comment below and tell someone in your life today that you see them, because sometimes that's all any of us is really asking for. Thank you for watching. God bless you, and I'll see you in the next story.